Okay, webcast is live. Over to the chairman of the Planning Committee, Councillor Richard Dallin.
Thank you. Very good afternoon. Welcome to our meeting on Thursday, October the 29th. We have quite a long agenda, so you'll be able to follow us through the afternoon. We'll go on each application as it comes along, and I'll be giving you a clear indication of which the application is. But as is customary, we start off with apologies for absence, and Leslie Farrell from our Democratic Services will update us, please.
I don't have any apologies for absence this afternoon. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we move on to item 2, declarations of interest. This is where members are asked to declare any interest and the nature of that interest which they may have in any of the items under consideration. Councillor Hollowell.
Chairman, 2 items this time. First of all, my normal declaration regarding all matters concerning archaeology as a member of the committee of the Northamptonshire Archaeological Society. And the second one, because I'm not allowed to refer to evidence which I think is relevant, I shall not be taking part in item 10 on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that decision was made by the chairman, myself, on that he referred to. Thank you. We go on to item 3, which are the minutes. There was the meeting we held on the 1st of October. Have you had a chance to read those? I hope you have. And will you confirm by putting your hands up that you believe it's a correct record of our deliberations? Thank you very much indeed. And I will sign those minutes. The minute signing actually is up to date. I was in the forum, the building that's behind my head, last week and was able to sign everything up to date. So, you know, the process is happening. And I had my mask on when I did so, in case those of you are wondering. Let me move on to item 4, Chairman's announcements. Well, here we are once again, virtually. We will be. I think it's highly improbable that we'll ever be back in the forum, the building that houses South Northants Council, until our council ceases to exist at the beginning of April, but you never know. As for other matters, we can't go on any site visits. That's also due to the COVID regulations. We are all in our different homes and establishments this afternoon, so would you make sure that when you're not speaking that your microphone is muted, and also that your mobile phone, should it be near you, is also muted. Thank you very much. We move on to our planning applications, and the first one we have is the former co-op site, Richmond Road in Towcester, and we'll start from hearing all about it by the case officer, Samuel Dix. Over to you, Samuel.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is before the committee as it concerns development of the council's own land. As such, I'm sure members will be familiar with the site and the proposals. Nevertheless, I will just share my screen to run through the details. As ever, being the first person up, I'm told that screen sharing is disabled currently.
Well, I hope we can, if you just press on until you're able to.
That's okay. Apologies, folks. That's now been enabled.
Yep, no, I've got it now. That's fine.
Good. Here we go then.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see that.
We can.
Good. The application site is the former co-op building and the surrounding car park off Richmond Road in Towcester. The proposed development is the demolition of the existing building and its replacement with extended parking facilities. I did just have some photos to run through quickly. I am conscious of the fact that most of the committee will be familiar with the site. This is the existing access point into the existing car park, which will remain largely unaltered by the proposals other than the installation of a more formalised pedestrian crossing across that access. This is the building itself to be demolished. As you can see, it's very much uncharacteristic of the conservation area, being a dark brick, very large in size, a hipped roof, and also in a considerable state of disrepair. These are the existing public conveniences that have been out of use for a long time, but are now proposed to be retained as a result of this development and refurbished for reopening in the future. This is the front facing Richmond Road of the existing building. Again, you can see it is of a very unsympathetic design and in a considerable state of disrepair. This is stood in the middle of the car park, looking towards the High Street in Towcester through the Spon shopping arcade. And indeed, you can see an individual walking through the pedestrian thoroughfare as it currently stands, and that will remain unaltered by the proposals. This is looking northwest towards the nearest listed building on the site, which is the Old Barn, Grade 2 listed building in that direction. This is looking out of the existing access towards the existing one-way system in the immediate vicinity of the site. And finally, this is looking eastwards along Richmond Road, and you can see some of the existing on-street parking in this location that will be relieved by the proposed development. Since the publication of the report, there's been an amended plan received that I will just show you now quickly. This has been prepared to address some of the concerns raised by the local highway authority and other stakeholders. Key matters to draw your attention to are the inclusion of this one-way system as shown by the arrows on the car park there. The pedestrian crossing at the main entrance that I referred to earlier, the inclusion of motorcycle parking bays in this particular part of the car park, and also electric vehicle parking bays towards the southwest corner. The development now also retains the public conveniences that I showed you earlier. That was a matter raised by several stakeholders during the course of the application. That is, however, the only significant change in terms of public realm improvements, and as such, the written updates now refer to a landscaping condition that will allow further planting or details of further planting to be provided in due course, irrespective of this particular plan. The one other matter to bring to the committee's attention is covered in the written updates and relates to the presence of bats. A preliminary roost appraisal has now been carried out, and that indicates that additional surveys are necessary to establish the exact nature and number of bats in the existing building. These will need to be carried out over a number of weeks in the spring. And as such, the written updates now also include a condition preventing the demolition until such time as this is carried out, and other processes in terms of licensing with Natural England. The condition will allow other aspects of the development in terms of the reconfiguration around the building to go ahead in the meantime. Subject to these two new conditions and the 8 listed in the report, the application is recommended for approval. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll have questions to you in just a second. One I'll just put to you concerning the landscaping. There is much desire that there should be decent landscaping, making it a pleasant area to walk through from the Waitrose end towards the town centre. Can you share with us the prospect that if we can have more landscaping as we wish, therefore there would be somewhat fewer car parking spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So the condition as worded in the written updates starts off with referring to notwithstanding the approved plans. So that essentially allows for a landscaping scheme to come forward that may well see the reduction in a few spaces. There's currently 152 proposed. So depending on the nature of the exact landscaping that comes forward, that will obviously naturally decrease because there is limited space on the sites that's presently not shown as car parking. So that number may well diminish in due course.
Okay, I open it up to other members who may wish to ask a question at this point of the officer. I don't see anyone who so wishes. Yes, I do. Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not a question for the officer. It's my apologies for arriving late, but I want to declare a non-pecuniary interest in this particular application because it's owned by the council. So if that could be registered with Democratic Service, I apologise. Thank you. Yeah,
duly noted. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bignell. All right, so we have the in the absence. Oh, Councillor Samiotis is waving vigorously at me, so I must ask her to say something. Yes.
Thank you. Just one question: how many car parking spaces are there now at the co-op?
There's 92 currently, so there'll be an addition of 60 as a result of this, or a maximum of 60, because obviously we've just said it will go down slightly as a result of landscaping.
And on the map, it indicates some of the spaces in red, with a red sort of area around them. What does that mean?
Shall I just share my screen again? That might help. So the spaces, can everybody see that? Okay. These are disabled and parent and child spaces. I suppose it's slightly confusing because this is a pedestrian walkway that runs through the site, and it happens to go around those spaces in the middle, but the ones to the northeast and the southwest they are disabled and parent and child spaces.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Samiotis. Well, we have the recommendation obviously before us to grant permission subject to these conditions. Just call upon the other ward member, Councillor Johns, if you want to say anything on the whole matter.
Thanks, Chairman. No, I fully support this application. I welcomed when the council purchased this site. I think it is much needed in Towcester, and I think the inclusion of electric charging points and future landscaping within the site to break up the mass of the car park, and the public toilets are all to be welcomed. I would say it is a little disappointing that the full plan for the parking arrangements and the landscaping wasn't included with this application, but I think we have the assurance of the council that is going ahead, and I'm happy to honour their word on that. I would suggest that when that is looked at, that part of the circulation also includes the central parking area, because currently, and as on the plan that was shown, it's very difficult to park. You have to, if you drive down, if you're as poor a driver as I, you find it very difficult to manoeuvre into a space, and you have to reverse back, which isn't very good for pedestrian safety. So I think that certainly does need addressing. I thought the original idea was to go to a specialist company to get advice on that, but as I say, overall I fully support the plans, and will vote to approve the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Perhaps the officer can also answer on the assumption that, and we're not going to prejudge this, we haven't yet gone to a vote, but what might be the timetable for all this, on the bearing in mind the bats issue, and that will have to be inspected again before the whole thing is complete? Can you give us an idea what that might be?
A timing of the implementation.
The whole business, whole thing. Once
I've not been furnished with details about that. I think that's a corporate matter that we wouldn't necessarily be concerned about in planning terms. Obviously, it's subject to a standard condition about commencing within 3 years, so it would certainly be within those timeframes. Other than that, I've not been given any information about that.
I'm obliged. Thank you very much indeed. On that basis, can I? Yes, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. My apologies. I should have declared an interest at the beginning.
Yes, I suppose you should.
My apologies.
That duly noted. Thank you very much for just mentioning that. All right, well, we have the recommendation. Is the councillor prepared to? Councillor Johns, thank you, and Councillor Samiotis, I'm grateful. So all those, this is to grant permission subject to the conditions and those added to. Those in favour of that, please raise your hands now. Actually, Leslie Farrell, we should do this.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman.
Well, with that, there you are. There's a preview of what's going to happen. I'm going to ask you now to call out the names. I was jumping the gun. You go ahead.
Yes, so did we have a proposer and a second?
Yes, we had Councillor Johns is proposing, Councillor Samiotis has seconded.
Okay, so I'll run through, and can I just clarify that it's Councillor Bignell and Councillor Cooper that have declared an interest and won't be voting?
That's right, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I think Councillor Breeze?
Thank you. I did raise this earlier and it was down to my discretion, and as my fellow councillors hadn't, but now have, I will.
Okay, thank you.
That's quite clear, yeah, I think.
Okay then, so we'll start off with Councillor Pritchard.
Agreed.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Mary-Ann Surgeson-Brooke.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Didn't register.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
That's unanimous then. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, and I was in favour as well.
Oh, I do apologise. I missed you.
I don't think my opinion would have made much difference, although it was in the majority. Thank you very much. So that is carried. We move on, if we may. We stay in Towcester for our second planning application. This is an application that was deferred from the Planning Committee on the 6th of August. It concerns the location of the South Oldhants Homes, Burkett House, Burkett Road in Towcester. And the case officer this time is Daniel Callis. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. I assume everyone can see the aerial photograph.
Yes, we can.
So item 7 is an application for the demolition of an existing office building and the erection in its place of a 3-storey block of flats containing 20 units. The site is located in Burkett Road, Towcester, and is currently the site of an existing office building. It has both vehicular and pedestrian access from Burkett Road. To the south of the site is the BAE Systems commercial building, which is the large white roof you can see. To the east or rear is the site of Farriers Court development by Bellway Homes, which is currently under construction, which includes a complex of B1 light industrial units immediately to the rear of the site. The application was deferred by committee in August, with members requesting a revised design to the external elevations. Just very briefly to give you a view of the existing site in Burkett Road, you have the building on the left, and then there's the trees at the front of the site, which should be retained as part of the proposal. So the layout of the site is unchanged from when the item previously came to committee. The trees, as I said, at the front are retained. The building is in the same position and has the same footprint as before. And vehicular access is taken from the new access road to the Farriers Court development that comes off Burkett Road down the side of the site. And there's a car park in the rear with 40 spaces. There's also brick-built communal bin stores and a brick-built cycle store. So the scheme that we had previously before committee was for a 3-storey but partially 2-storey brick structure with a flat roof of quite a contemporary design. The proposal as amended is the one you see on the screen now. So the changes in summary are the addition of a render finish to the ground floor, which is to echo the Leeson's Court building on the opposite side of Burkett Road. There's also the inclusion of a hipped roof to the top of the building and change to the window design in terms of windows, lintels and sills to give a slightly more traditional and domestic appearance. And a view here of it in the street scene with indications of the trees in front as retained. And just to clarify with the roof, it's a hipped roof, but the central section is flat. So on the 3-storey section, the central section is flat and you wouldn't see that from street level. The 2-storey elements, the central section is actually a flat roof section that's immediately on top of the first floor, and that creates a sort of sunken section within the building which can accommodate plant and have that discrete from view from the street. In terms of updates, the committee's attention is drawn to the neighbour objection, which is included in the written updates. In summary, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in the report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement covering the heads of terms also outlined in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Just one point you might like to clarify for us. There was concern about the impact of noise from the adjoining business. Do you feel that has been satisfactorily resolved, or is there a compromise we're talking about here?
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, in the reports I've set out what's occurred since the previous committee. The applicant has submitted a further noise assessment, which has indicated that there could be the provision of mechanical ventilation to the affected accommodation, as well as allowing the windows to be opened. Following on from that, officers reconsulted with the Council's environmental protection team, who reiterated their concern about the ability for windows to open and the negative impacts that could result from that on the amenity of occupiers. And if that resulted subsequently in a complaint, it could have a negative impact on the BAE Systems building in terms of them having to mitigate the noise from their plant. However, officers have looked at the view in the round, and I think the compromise solution, which gives occupants the ability to either open windows or use mechanical ventilation. And the other mitigation is that those windows could be openable so that they face away from BAE Systems, not towards it. officers feel that that would be an adequate and acceptable situation and have therefore removed the respective condition from the previous recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. All right, if you'd like to lose the split screen, Daniel, then we can open it up to any other questions that people might have. Any questions to Daniel Callis on what he's been saying so far from any of you? Yes, Councillor Semiotis first.
Thanks, Dan. Just to clarify then, all of the windows are going to be able to be opened in all of the flats?
Yes, that's correct. There's still the condition requiring the submission of a noise mitigation scheme, which will allow the details to be resolved, but we're not saying that any of that needs to include windows being fixed shut.
Thank you.
Councillor Johns?
It may be outside Dan's remit, but regarding the Section 106 contributions, I mean, given this council is to disappear next year, there are a number of sums there playable for items that won't be delivered by this council or West Northants Council. I'm thinking of the sports pitches and so forth. So is there a mechanism for notifying the town council of this funding being available at a time sometime in the future? Or how is that worked? And the other thing is, I mean, the Towcester Town Centre Fund seems to be a mythical fund that money goes into but never appears to come out of.
Yes, thank you. In terms of the provisions carrying through, I would assume, although it's not, as you say, necessarily within my remit, I would assume that provisions would automatically allow these things to carry through into the new authority with, I mean, obviously, to a large extent, it will be the same members of staff dealing with this, so there should be some continuity and allowing the town council to be notified of things that are relevant to them. I just noticed Mr. Barrett is indicating perhaps he wishes to come in at this point.
I was going to ask him. I was also going to ask Jim Newton, but since Mr. Barrett's volunteered first, we'll go to him. That's the solicitor, Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and obviously this isn't a unique situation. It's happened up and down the country. All that happens is that there will be an order promoted by the Secretary of State that effectively says anything the previous authority could do that it is automatically assumed to have been done by the new authority. So any agreement drawn up and concluded before the new authority comes into being or comes into being properly, anywhere where you see South Northamptonshire Council, you will just read the title of the new council. It's a common situation. People are quite used to dealing with it now, so it won't be a problem.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Councillor Johns, you raised the matter. Do you want to come back and say any more?
No, I think it's obviously the onus now will be on the primarily on the town council to remind the new authority of, you know, if this goes forward and gets built, that the money will be owed.
All right. Okay. Well, I think we've got an answer on that one. Any other? Well, thank you, Dan. You've said your bit. We have a chance to discuss this in more detail, although we did discuss it obviously at the previous council. This is merely a return. Councillor Johns, I come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's to a point. It's part of, you know, sort of personal taste, isn't it? It's a subjective view, the visual appearance. I personally think this fits in better into this particular street scene. I think the original application and design had no problem with it, perhaps in another location, but given the adjacent properties, I think this design is preferable, and therefore I support the recommendation.
On that basis, unless anybody else wants to say something, would you care to propose the recommendation there?
I'm prepared to propose, Chairman, yes.
And to second it, Councillor Semiotis. Councillor Townsend, you want to jump in before we get anywhere?
Well, just before you go
yes.
on to, I mean, you know, I think we have been concerned by this thing. This is a question which is occupying a lot of people, of offices being turned into very quite sort of mean sized flats and such like. Are we certain? I mean, is the size of these rooms and the size of the apartments in line with well, it used to be the Park and Norris standards? I mean, are they? I mean, I think it's very wrong if people are forced into some tiny little rabbit hutches, and I hope that this isn't a very good example of them.
Well, Daniel Callis, can you answer that one?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, certainly, obviously, by redeveloping the site, there's much greater capacity to actually create accommodation that's, specifically designed for that purpose, rather than converting the existing offices into residential, which the applicant already has consent for under Class O of the Permitted Development Order. So, yes, in terms of what is proposed, it does meet with the standards that we have for affordable housing, which is for accommodation to a certain standard, and with the majority of the scheme being affordable housing through shared ownership, the market housing units that are in there are to the same standard.
All right, I think that's you've got an answer. Councillor Townsend, are you happy with that? We can't hear you.
Proof of the pudding will be in the eating. But I just think it is a general point that this turning of offices into living accommodation is not always satisfactory.
No, but here we are not. We're
no, exactly. Well, I think it sounds
a general noted. A general point noted. Thank you. Well, we have a recommendation. Leslie Farrell, do you want to just call the names out and see if everybody feels about it?
Chairman, I think Councillor Hollowell.
Oh, I beg his pardon, Councillor Hollowell. Sorry.
Chairman, just to say two things, really, three things. On the design, 9.3, 9.5, page 34, much better design. I think we were right to refer that back. Similarly, with the windows on 9.7, 9.8, and 9.10, I think that compromise arrangement is much more acceptable. On the 106 on page 36, just two things. One just wonders about the difference between primary education and early years. As Mr. Newton pointed out last time, it really is between the applicant and in this case the county council. But you just wonder. And finally, I see we have down monitoring costs £1,000. I've said in the past many times, I don't think we always cover ourselves properly with monitoring costs. And I note in item 9, which is a much larger, much more complex development, but there we are putting down the phrase up to 5,000. And that to me sounds a lot more sensible to choose a figure which is, we think is as much as we can charge as a maximum, rather than just plumping for a figure almost out of the sky, £1,000. But that's all I have to say, Chair. Thank you.
Daniel Callis, do you want to come back on that point about the cost there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I think specifically in relation to the point about monitoring costs, that the figure there is in accordance with what's set out in the Council's adopted supplementary planning document for developer contributions, which actually sets out thresholds at which the amount goes up. So if the total amount of Section 106 contributions is below a certain figure, you get £1,000. If it's above a certain figure, you get £5,000 or another figure. Now, clearly, that's something that could be reviewed as part of the drafting of the new replacement supplementary planning document, which I think is going through our policy team at the moment. So, it's something that can change, but what we have in there at the moment is in accordance with the adopted amounts.
All right,
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. And then maybe Councillor Hollowell's point can be raised in another place, but thank you all the same. In the absence then of any further comments, I'll go back to you, Leslie, for the roll call.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Could I just check that it was Councillor Samiotis that seconded this
She did,
proposal?
yes.
You did. Thank you.
Yes.
So if I can start with Councillor, well, I'll start with yourself, if I can, please, Councillor Dallin.
Yes, in favour, 4.
Councillor Pritchard.
In favour.
Councillor Bignall.
4.
Councillor Breeze.
4.
Councillor Budden.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Hollowell,
4,
Councillor Johns,
4,
Councillor Samiotis,
4,
Councillor Surgeson Brooke,
4,
Councillor
there.
Townsend,
4,
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire,
You have got your mute.
thank you, and Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous then. Thank you, Chairman. That's
Okay.
approved.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, we now move on, if we may, to our third planning application this afternoon. This takes us away from Towcester to Courtine Hall, near the M1. Daniel Callis, again, the case officer. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so I trust everyone can again see the aerial photograph.
Yeah.
So item 8 is an application for the erection of 4 agricultural barns for rearing poultry, along with associated infrastructure, including feed bins and feed blending rooms, plus a grain store and installation of ground source heat pumps and ground loops, and also finally a rainwater attenuation basin. The application is accompanied by an environmental statement. The site comprises part of one arable field, the one adjacent to the M1, and the whole of another to the south, and lies to the east of Courtine Hall and to the south of Quinton. The field in which the built development is proposed is reasonably level, with a farm track running along the southwestern edge and is predominantly bound by hedging. The field for the ground source heat loops, which is the southern field, as I said, is also relatively flat and bound by hedges. Beyond the northeast site boundary is a narrow planted embankment leading down to the M1 motorway, whilst to the northwest is the remainder of the open arable field from which the site has been taken. To the west of the site are a series of pastures and a complex of buildings known as East Lodge Farm, containing a range of former agricultural buildings converted to commercial uses and a number of dwellings. These properties all form part of the wider Courtine Hall estate. To the immediate south of the site is the existing poultry unit, not shown on the aerial photograph because of the date it was taken, which comprises 4 large poultry buildings and ancillary structures. And to the southwest and southeast beyond are arable fields, some of which contain large wind turbines, which you can possibly make out here and here. So in terms of the site appearance, this is looking on the access road from the north of the site as you're heading towards where the development would take place. So you have the access road, you can see the wind turbines beyond the site. The M1 is on the left-hand side. You can just about make out the top of a couple of HGVs there. And just in the distance, you can see the feed bins of the existing poultry unit. This is the view of East Lodge Farm, which is to the west of the site. So these are the former agricultural buildings which have been converted to other uses. This is a slightly closer view of the existing poultry buildings. So the proposal would be in the foreground on the left-hand side. A view of that site looking across towards the motorway. You can again see an HGV, which gives an indication of the level of the road to the site. And a view from the entrance to the existing units looking north. So the application site would fill the foreground, and then the remainder of the field before the trees would remain as agricultural land. And then this is a view to the west of the site, and this is the field in which the attenuation basin and ground source heat loops would be positioned. So the site layout shows the existing poultry unit with the 4 buildings here and associated plant and other equipment. The proposal is for 4 almost identical buildings continuing in parallel to those and parallel to the motorway to the northwest. And then beyond those, a grain store within a large area of hard standing. Then the field to the south would be almost completely occupied by the ground source heat pump loop system, which would be completely submerged underground, and then the land above would be reinstated and returned to agricultural use. And then the triangular section that remains in the northern corner of that field would be where the attenuation basin would be positioned. Just to give a better indication of the poultry buildings themselves, you see they're very similar to what we saw in the photographs of the existing buildings, quite low, with an eaves height of only 3.3 meters and a ridge of just over 6, and then the feed bins and the other plant and utility buildings. And then finally the grain store, which is a fairly simple modern agricultural building, but clad in materials to match the poultry units, so that there's an element of consistency between those. There are no updates on this item, and the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. A question to you. Given that the Environment Agency have granted this proposed development a permit, on what grounds can we further discuss it as planners?
Well, I still think it's the responsibility of the authority as the determining planning authority to consider these matters separate to the Environment Agency.
No, I'm not disputing that, but I'm just wondering how that limits our discussion, if you will.
Well, clearly the input from the Environment Agency and from our own environmental protection officers is of no objection, because matters of things like odour, air pollution and other things like that have already been considered in the granting of the Environment Agency's permit.
And these matters of odour, for example, and vermin very much form part of the objections to this proposal, as noted in the report.
They do.
All right.
Yes.
Well, indeed. Well, thank you. Let us, if you revert the screen now, and among the rest of you, who would like to ask any questions of Mr. Callis at this point? Don't be shy. Nobody's got anything to ask at the moment. All right. And we haven't got either ward member here, so who would like to kick off a discussion on this one then for us?
Could we have the public speaker?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, we could. We could have a public speaker, which might influence what you're going to say next. Yeah, we've got several this afternoon, and so we're going to the first one. Thank you. There's the Ian Pick, is Ian Pick Associates. He is the agent. Let's see what he's got to say first. And he's on recording. That's as is all our speakers. Can't hear him at the moment, Leslie. Here's something that.
Sorry, I'll pause that. Could you hear him speaking?
No, we couldn't hear anything, I'm afraid. We heard some sort of mumbling in the background, but we couldn't really hear anything. So if you could start again at the beginning, if possible. Still can't hear anything, I'm afraid.
Can nobody hear?
No, there's just a slight buzz in the background, but we can't hear anybody actually speaking properly. So,
just bear with me a moment.
Yeah, we will. Just to explain to people watching us, we can't have public speakers in the building in front of us because of the COVID restrictions. Therefore, they record their messages on tape for us, or else I read them out if they haven't done so. So we're waiting to hear from Ian Pick, who is the agent associated with this.
Thank you. Speak at the Planning Committee. My name is Ian Pick, and I am speaking as the agent in support of application reference S/2020/1163/EIA. This proposal seeks planning permission to.
Can I just check that you can hear him now?
Well, it was if you could raise the level slightly, it was more or less.
I'm on full volume, unfortunately.
Oh well, okay. Well, if you could go back to the beginning, then we can hear him from the beginning, and then it sequential, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak at the Planning Committee. My name is Ian Thick, and I am speaking as the agent in support of application reference S/2020/1163/EIA. This proposal seeks planning permission to expand the existing poultry farm at Eats Lodge Farm, Courting Hall. The proposal seeks consent for 4 a number additional poultry houses, a grain store, a ground source heat pump system to provide renewable heating for the poultry houses. The project represents an investment by the applicants of around 3 million and will create additional employment on the site for 2 full-time workers. The business produces chicken for the UK retail market. Currently, the UK produces around 20 million chickens per week. The balance of chicken consumed in the United Kingdom is imported from the EU, the Far East and South America. The development will therefore improve the UK's self-sufficiency, reducing the requirement for imports.
I'm sorry, we can't hear much of what he's saying at this point, Leslie.
I think what I'll do is just stop sharing my screen and just play it over my microphone, I think.
Yeah, it is important that we hear his full version.
Is it possibly because you've got emails on, Leslie, that's muting it as it comes in? So if you turned your emails off, maybe that would help, because it sounds like you had a ding and it went quiet. That was just
no, I have to have my, right, I see what you mean.
Because as that email came in and dinged, it actually muted the sound.
Right. Let me see if I can.
Yes.
Leslie, you hadn't actually shared your screen at any point.
Oh, hadn't I?
No.
No.
Oh, well, that was why then.
Shall we go back to the beginning, Leslie?
Yeah.
We'll get there in the end.
I've gone share screen. Sound.
No, it hasn't shared.
No, it hasn't shared. Share.
Ah. Yes.
Are we there now?
We are. Yeah, we're there now. So, sure, we'll be familiar. Let's hear him again anyway.
In support of application reference S/2020.
Can you hear him?
Yeah, go on with that. Yeah, continue.
/1163/EIA. This proposal seeks planning permission to expand the existing poultry farm at Eats Lodge Farm, Courting Hall. The proposal seeks consent for 4 a number additional poultry houses, a grain store, a ground source heat pump system to provide renewable heating for the poultry houses. The project represents an investment by the applicants of around 3 million and will create additional employment on the site for 2 full-time workers. The business produces chicken for the UK retail market. Currently, the UK produces around 20 million chickens per week and is only around 75% self-sufficient. The balance of chicken consumed in the United Kingdom is imported from the EU, the Far East and South America. The development will therefore improve the UK's self-sufficiency, reducing the requirement for imports, which are from countries with lower standards than our own. British standards for intensive farming are higher than the rest of the world, including the EU. Over 1 million people signed the petition to amend the Agriculture Bill to try to avoid trade deals with countries which have lower standards of production and welfare than the UK. And this was particularly relevant to chicken, with the prospect of American chlorinated chicken being included in any trade deal. As an intensive livestock unit, the operation of this site is controlled by the Environment Agency through environmental permitting. The Environment Agency have already granted the permit for this development. The environmental permit requires the site to operate to best available techniques and offers very high standards of environmental controls. The development is highly sustainable, with all heating requirements of the site being provided by on-site renewables in the form of ground source heating. Also, wheat grown on the farm will be used as part of the feed ration for the chickens. The site also has excellent transport links, being located 2.5 kilometres from junction 15 of the M1. The site is also around 20 miles from the processing plant of Brackley, so food miles are very low, with poultry transport to the factory taking less than half an hour. The application has been fully considered by the planning officers and statutory consultees. There are no Statutory Consultative objections to the planning application and a clear recommendation of approval. It's therefore respectfully requested that planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So there we are. We heard in the end completely from Ian Pick, who is the agent, Ian Pick Associates. Right. Well, now then, anybody like to say something on this one? You've heard his view. Have you got a view, anybody on the committee? Councillor Townsend, I'll call you, then Councillor Breeze afterwards.
Well, only what's the colour? I mean, it is quite prominent. It's quite adjacent to the M1. I mean, we like to think that people arriving in North Hampshire have a good impression of our thing. So I hope it's not. It should be. I would have thought a dark roof and a dark colour.
Mr. Callett, Daniel Callett.
Thank you, Chairman. So yeah, the plans confirm that the external finish of the cladding will be green. It's described as juniper green, which is fairly dark green and is very similar to the existing poultry units. So again, you know, it's giving harmony between what's there at the moment and the proposal. Good, thanks.
Happy. All right, Councillor Breeze.
Thank you, Chair. And this was a question. I didn't raise my hand during the question.
No, that's all right.
Anyway, I noticed that the agent said that the poultry unit would achieve the very highest of standards of environmental controls, which I presume also applies to the existing units. But under the objections, I guess they're the nearest residents are raising concerns about odours. And so I wondered what the expectation is in terms of what neighbours have to accept in terms of odour nuisance, and if you could revisit where the nearest residential dwellings to the application are. Thank you.
Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I will just see. Yes, if I reshare my screen very briefly. Just to show the aerial photograph, which shows the site. So the poultry buildings would be here. You have the existing existing dwellings in Quinton, closest in this position. And then there is also Quinton Green. So the road continues off the map here, unfortunately, south, roughly where my hand is continuing. And then there's Quinton Green, which is over in this direction, approximately where I'm indicating.
How far do you think, a mile? Or?
Off the top of my head, Chairman, I don't have an exact distance, but it is included in the odour mitigation report that was provided and has been assessed by our own environmental protection officers. I think the thing to point out is that there are certain standards to apply with odour. It's not a case that you know, residents should never smell anything. I think in terms of it to meet what's considered acceptable, then an infrequent, fairly modest amount of odour, you know, a few times a year, whatever, is acceptable. It's not a case that, you know, if you can smell it once, then it's unacceptable. Although I'm no odour expert, unfortunately, Chairman.
But the Environment Agency appears to be quite happy with it. They wouldn't have granted the permit if they thought it was lots of odour.
Yes, they do. And I think my the report and the assessment that our own officers have done indicate that, generally speaking, the site is quite comfortably within the limits. The only place where it would exceed the limits would actually be in relation to the dwellings at East Lodge Farm itself. But obviously they are part of you know, the same ownership and the same estate as the poultry unit would be. So therefore they're considered sort of ancillary dwellings that you know would be able to put up with that.
Thank you. Councillor Breeze.
I'm just wondering if Dan, if you have had experience of the odours, have you, when you were out there, what was your impression of odour and odour control?
To be honest, the day I did my site visit, I didn't notice any odour whatsoever, although I believe that the odour is probably more of an issue at certain times of the process. The chicken rearing goes through a process of approximately a month or month and a half, and every time you get to the end of that process, there's the clearing out of the building before the new flock goes in, and I think that's the point at which you can have an issue.
Yes, the life cycle of a chicken is remarkably short. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Breeze. And if you could revert the screen again, Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any observations? Councillor Budden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I walk the area quite frequently and I have never smelt any odour whatsoever, and there's been no increase in vermin on the existing site. It is perfectly natural, shall I put it that way. I've never smelt anything up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else got the... yes, Councillor Hollowell.
Just a couple of minor points on conditions, just to point out. Item 7 in the conditions, archaeology, really important in this particular case for once, because on the map on the front of the report, the circular feature at the bottom is a possible Iron Age burial site, so that's really important. And also in 7.4, where we're talking about what happens to any finds that appear, I have no problem with most of it, apart from the parentheses section which says Northamptonshire ARC. I still remain sceptical about this because it's basically the idea of having a central archaeological archive for Northamptonshire seems to have stalled. Buildings have been built and staff have been appointed, but the whole project has come to a halt. And I understand that it's not likely to even restart before the end of the life of the county council. It's not in West Northamptonshire anyway. And I think these conditions generally would be better off left as they are, but less those two words, the words in brackets. I think they'd be better left off. I think otherwise, I think that the condition covers everything as it is without that. Thank you, Chairman.
Daniel, are you willing to omit those bracketed words?
Certainly, sir. I mean, the way that the recommendation is written at the moment does allow for officers to carry out amendments as necessary to the conditions subsequent to committee. So we could investigate that, give it some further thought outside of the committee itself. And just to pick up the other point Councillor Hollowell made about the importance of the burial site that's potentially there. I mean, the discharge of the condition would be undertaken with full consultation with the county council archaeologist. So we would make sure that everything was covered.
Good, thank you very much indeed. I sense we possibly have gone round and said all we need to say on this one, or may wish to say on it. So can I look for a recommendation, somebody to propose the recommendation which we have to grant permission subject to conditions? So who's willing to jump in on this one then?
I can propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Budden. A seconder?
I'd like to second it.
You may. Councillor Pritchard. So Councillor Budden proposing, Councillor Pritchard is seconding. Leslie?
Chairman. So this is to grant permission for this application. So Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Bignell.
For.
Councillor Breeze. Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dallin.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
That's unanimous then. Thank you, Chairman. That's been approved.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed. So on we go to our next application. Now, this is another application that was deferred from a previous planning committee, this one on the 3rd of September, and it takes us to Paulsbury. The officer for this one is Peter Gittins. Peter Gittins, are you ready to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, this was deferred from the 3rd of September to resolve some outstanding issues with respect to noise and highways. It was originally presented by my colleague Maria Philpott. Okay, I'll just share my screen if I can. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, that's
yes, fine. Okay, that's the location plan. So this is a scheme off Grays Lane in Paulsbury, and it's for 100% affordable housing for 19 affordable homes, when that includes 9 social rented properties. It's located to the east of Paulsbury, and to the southwest of the A5, the main road, and it's accessed off Grays Close via Grays Lane. It is outside the development boundary for the most part, where the housing is going to be located. You can see where I'm indicating with my cursor. Okay, there's existing landscaping along the A5. It's some 30 metres. The boundary of the site from the A5 is some 30 metres away. I'll just look at the proposal plans, revised plans. Okay, I just wanted to mention, so that this scheme is policy compliant with H3 entry-level exception sites of the South Northamptonshire Local Plan Part 2 and paragraph 71 of the NPPF, which says that local authorities should support entry-level exception sites where they're adjacent to an existing settlement, not already allocated for housing, not larger than 1 hectare, in which this site is 0.5 of a hectare, and there need to be 1 or more types of affordable housing proposed. In this case, it's going to be shared ownership and social rent. And in particular, the 9 social rented properties are very welcomed by the officers, as these are cheaper and therefore more accessible than affordable rent. The Strategic Housing Market Assessment in 2010 sets a figure of between 173 and 182 affordable homes to be provided, and we're under delivering. Consider we're under delivering in that regard. There is evidence of need. 32 households have already expressed an interest. And there's only one other similar site since the widening of the definition in the NPPF in 2008, and that's been at Lynn Walk in Hackleton, which was a very similar scheme for 21 affordable homes, and that settlement's the same position in the settlement hierarchy. Okay, turning to the core issues that we needed to address in terms of this being deferred. I'll just zoom in a little here. There were highways issues in relation to the potential adoption of the road, and we have an amended plan which shows an increase, changing the bell mouth and widening to encompass the footways. Highways have been consulted on this and are now happy that it's to an adoptable standard. So it was issues surrounding the bell mouth and the footways, and those have now been satisfactorily resolved in terms of the highways issues. The other issue that we needed to report back on as to how we were going to deal with the noise mitigation from the main road. There has been a meeting between the applicant's noise consultant, and a member of the environmental protection team, and the planning case officer, and some mitigation measures have been agreed as suitable. This includes standard double glazing and trickle vents to the properties facing onto the road. That is designed so that there is adequate mitigation in terms of noise inside the properties. so no need for mechanical ventilation and permanently shut windows. So opening windows, standard double glazing with trickle vents to allow ventilation. And in addition to that, in relation to the noise to the rear gardens, it's proposed to gently raise the gardens to a metre at the rear. So we've got a metre raised level at the rear gardens, and then top this with a 2 metre acoustic fence, which will sit on top of a necessary 1 metre retaining wall to retain the raised land level. I say there's some 30 metres then from that new boundary treatment to the main road, and there's vegetation along the main road, so which would screen the retaining wall in any case. Okay, I've no additional updates in relation to this matter, and recommend this application for approval for the reasons set out within the risk report and subject to a 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to go back to normal screen, thank you. Any members wish to ask a question of the officer, having heard what he's had to say at all? No? I don't see. Yes, I do now. You're on a different screen. Councillor Johns.
Yes, I mean, there's nothing in the report I could see from the education authorities. I mean, one of our concerns last time was sustainability of the site. I mean, we know there's a primary school in Paulsbury, but the nearest secondary school is obviously Spawn, and that's already well oversubscribed. So anything to come back on education?
As I wasn't the original case officer on this one, I wondered if I could defer that to Paul Seckington.
Yes, please do. Paul Seckington.
Maybe contained within the original report for.
Yeah, let's hear from Mr. Seckington then, so far today.
Hello. There's paragraph 9.43 of the original report that touches upon education contribution. It refers to the primary school there in terms of the amount needed and of contribution that was requested. It also goes about secondary school, but the secondary school is will be carried out through any SIL that would come through. So it's not a request that we'd normally ask for on residential development.
Chairman, it wasn't really in terms of contributions, it was in terms of capacity of schools.
Paul Seckington, capacity of schools.
So yeah, in terms of the capacity of the primary school, this development is expected to generate a pupil yield of 4 primary age pupils and market-led. Oh no, hang on a minute. Need to make sure I'm referring to the right report. Oh no, I am in the right one. Tell you what, I'll pause my answer, look into it, then come back later.
Can I help, Chairman?
Sorry, yes, Hank, go ahead. Yes, Jim Newton.
Yeah, last time out we had 2 applications for sites in the same village, didn't we? And they were presented in such a way as to ultimately is to say between the 2 of them, there's too many children going to be generated for the capacity of the school, but each of one of them individually would be able to be accommodated by the village primary school. That was the advice that we got from the Education Authority, from my memory. So there was a suggestion that if both had been approved, then one of them would have made a financial contribution. But you know, it's kind of a moot point now, I believe, because the other one was refused.
Well, indeed, you're hearing there from Jim Newton, our Assistant Director of Planning and Economy, and Paul Seckington, Senior Management Development Management. Councillor Johns, do you want to?
Chairman, my primary concern was secondary school places.
Yeah, so which Swan School is full at the moment.
It doesn't matter what financial contribution comes forward. The nearest secondary school just hasn't the capacity on its site.
So yes, the secondary school level, that's what we're talking about, or Councillor Johns is. Paul seconding, do you want to come back on that? Have you got the answer on that one? Capacity?
Sorry.
Do you
My
want to give it up
confusion.
at the moment?
No. My confusion before was I was reading the report and it was referring to the market-led scheme, and that was confused me. But Jim obviously clarified it's because we were trying to refer to the two schemes on the same committee. In terms of the capacity of the secondary school, because secondary school places is governed by the SIL regulations, we don't ask for that information or contribution during these types of developments, and a lot of the housing that we're proposing here is generally for people who are waiting to get on the waiting list already from the local area, who kids already may be going to that school.
You say you don't ask. Is that because it's not the practice to ask? Just for
No, it's because it's covered by the SIL regulations.
All right,
That's where our payments go to. Yeah.
All right. Councillor Samiotis, I think you wanted to ask something. Is that right?
I was just going to comment on the secondary school issue. Because I'm not 100% sure if I think Paulsbury is a feeder school for Spon, but it's also a lot of children from Paulsbury could also go to Kingsbrook in Dingshanger. What also is, so I just don't know how it works with the feeder thing, because some of those children that are living in Paulsbury potentially, if they can't get into the primary school there, could be going to any of the new primary schools in Towcester, which then obviously that would be a feeder school for Spon. And we all know, particularly those of us that have met with Spon School, that it is already oversubscribed and there are absolutely no spaces there at all, and that people trying to move to Towcester to get their children into Spon are just having absolutely no joy whatsoever, because they just can't get them into there unless their children are starting primary school in year probably 4 or 5. So it is, I understand that it's not probably something officers have to do, but it really is something that needs to be taken into account.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether Jim Newton or Paul Siggin want to have a sort of a comment on that, sort of general observation about this education problem. Jim Newton?
Yeah, I know a little bit about the secondary school because my eldest is currently going through this whole process where we have to choose where we go on the which we put on the list. So you make 3 choices of the secondary schools based on what your preference is and what you think the likely chances of your child getting their choice. So it's not a case of if you live right next to the school then you automatically get a place in it anyway. The Education Authority, the county council, has a duty to provide secondary education places for children, and there's a very lengthy process that they have to go through. I mean, it's months and months that is allowed, as I understand it, for them to complete that process to match all of the secondary age children that they have to provide places for to all of the secondary school places that are available. It's further complicated by the academisation that happened, well, maybe 10 years ago, perhaps, where the Education Authority doesn't have direct control over all secondary school places anymore, because a lot of them are now provided by the academies, who have their own selection criteria. So I suppose, long story short, secondary education places must be provided within the county by the county council as the educational authority, even if that was a problem for South Northamptonshire Planning Committee in principle. That I don't think that is a reason for refusal in this case, and it's that same argument would apply to any site anywhere in the county.
Indeed, I was going to say, notwithstanding the comments that have been made, we have this application before us for this particular site to be developed for this social rented and shared ownership houses and so on. So that's what we're considering this afternoon, but the discussion nevertheless is interesting, and I'm sure the public will find it interesting too. That can be pursued perhaps in other ways. Anybody else want to say something on this particular application as we've got it here before us this afternoon? Indeed, ask a question. No. So we move perhaps to the stage where I look to somebody to propose that we grant permission, or if you wish to the contrary, put a contrary motion, but we get to that stage of a vote, I feel. Who is Councillor Bignell?
Yes, I propose we accept the recommendation from the officer.
Thank you very much indeed. A seconder for that, please. Who do I see? I see Councillor Budden. Thank you very much indeed. So we have the recommendation to grant permission subject to conditions and subject to a S106 legal agreement. Over to you, Leslie Farrell.
Thank you. Start with Councillor Pritchard.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bignell.
4.
Councillor Breeze.
4.
Councillor Budden.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Dallin.
4.
Councillor Hollowell.
4.
Councillor Johns.
4.
Councillor Samiotis.
4.
Councillor Surgeson Brook.
4.
Councillor Townsend.
4.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
4.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
4.
That's unanimous again. Thank you, Chairman. That's been approved.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, on we go, and we're going around the district now to Middleton Cheney, and the next application, and our place officer here is Claire Caldwell. Claire, your turn to shout this one through us.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just share my screen for you.
Thank you.
Hopefully this is going to work.
I think it looks promising. It is.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah. Go on,
Right, so this is an application, a full application for planning permission for 32 homes on the western edge of Middleton Cheney. You can see the red application site boundary on the screen in front of you. This is the Banbury Lane. Banbury is in this direction off this plan. And this provides access via Miller's Way and through onto Tanner's Close to existing development. One of those is a development here, which is developed by Barwood Homes, the same applicant, for 10 houses pursuant to a 2014 permission. And this part of the site has been developed out by Bovis under a 2011-2012 consent for 79 homes. This area here at the bottom of the application site is an existing attenuation pond which serves the existing development. And just while I'm on this plan, I just wanted to point out to you a lot of the neighbour letters that have come in refer to a 90-degree bend on Miller's Way, and that's in this area of the site here. You can see there's quite a sharp bend as you come round from Miller's Way at that corner. On the committee plan before you, I should just say that this is an updated plan. It was in error. The village confines weren't originally shown on the plan that was sent out with the committee, so that's been updated. So the application site is outlined in blue on this plan, and you can see the thick dashed line shows the village confines in the Part 2 local plan that run down the western side of the application site, around the attenuation pond and back down. And the slightly longer dashes represent the public right-of-way, which runs within the site along its western boundary and also around the attenuation pond. And that ultimately would take you into the village centre. On this plan, you can also see that there is an existing play area off Miller's Way that has been referred to, and that's in this location. Taking you to the aerial picture just gives you a view of the site in context. You can probably see the tree line on the western boundary a bit more clearly on this plan, and the attenuation pond, the play areas, and this gives you a wider view of that Bovis development adjacent. Just for the avoidance of any doubt, this is the extract from the local plan Part 2, which shows the village confines, which is the black line, and this is the application site boundary right on this northwestern edge of the village. I got a series of photographs just to show you, to give you some idea of context. So this is the Banbury Lane at the northern edge of the site. This is the existing access into Miller's Way, and these properties on the left are the site already developed by Barwood Homes. And this is looking in the opposite direction. So the access is behind me in this photo, and these are the Barwood Homes properties that front out onto onto Banbury Lane. This is the access as it exists at present. So this is the top northern corner of the application site. And this is stood at the top by Banbury Lane, looking down at the application site. So what you see here on the western boundary is that tree line that I showed you on the aerial plan. The attenuation pond is at the bottom. This is the Bovis Homes development, which fronts out onto this piece of land. And you can just see in the left some of the Barwoods developments, which also look out onto the site. And this is me just moving round the site so you can see. So these are the Bovis development homes that face out onto the application site. And you can see they're quite traditionally detailed with chimneys and cottage windows, pitched roofs and porches. And we're moving round again here, just a bit of a closer angle. And these are the properties that you see on your approach. So the application site is just behind me here now on the right hand side. I think residents have referred to gateway features and this approach into the development, and you can see here some attractive stone walls and piers, and on the opposite side there is a small area of open space. This is stood at the bottom next to the attenuation pond, looking up back towards Banbury Lane. So this is the application site, and these are those Barwood Homes properties that front onto it at the top. That's the attenuation pond. And this is the other side. This is where the public right-of-way runs, Banbury Lane at the top, down towards the attenuation pond at the bottom. You can see a difference in levels, as you'd expect. The attenuation pond's at the lowest ground level, rising up to the road on Miller's Way. This is to show you, this is an existing footpath link. This is Tanner's Close, roughly just where I'm pointing there, and that's where the extension would come through, which you'll see in a minute on the site layout plan. And this path would lead you down ultimately to the village. And this is a private drive, which some residents have referred to in their responses to the application, and some concerns about how that would be affected by the connection through. And this is just to show you a desire line which runs alongside the Bovis site up to Miller's Way, which I'll show you in a moment. The applicants are proposing to hard surface and make into a more formal footpath as part of the application. Now, some of the residents have raised concerns about seeing photographs and seeing what the site looks like at a weekend when people are at home and are parked, their cars are parked at their houses. So in recognition of that, I have done a site visit on a Saturday. So apologies for the quality of the photo. It's a very, very rough day. But this is a Saturday afternoon, and this is the application site just on your left. But as you see, when you get into Miller's Way, there are a lot of cars parked on the street. So the residents have pointed that out, and I wanted to be able to represent that for you. And this is Miller's Way. This is that 90-degree bend. Okay, so this is the site plan which we now have before us. When the application was originally submitted, it was for 40 houses, but it has subsequently been reduced now to 32 units in total. And what you've got here is you've got some properties fronting onto Banbury Lane to replicate what's on the Barwoods development here. Then you've got a row of properties which follow the curve and front round onto Miller's Way. And as you can see, these have tandem parking spaces. This is one of the issues that residents have raised as a concern with the application, people reversing out and potentially parking on Miller's Way. This is the hard surfaced footpath that the applicants are proposing to follow the desire line. So there is a continuous link into the village from Miller's Way down past the attenuation pond. Then you have this connection into Tanner's Close, And you have the properties facing outwards with some informal space between them and the attenuation pond. The original scheme had properties backing onto the attenuation pond, so this is a significant improvement. And then we have properties facing out onto the countryside edge. They may look like side elevations, but they're not. They're front elevations facing out. And then this public footpath, which at the moment is just a grass track across the field. The applicants are proposing to hard surface following a request from the Ramblers to do that, and that is proposed to be hard surfaced, as I say. Just a couple of things I want to point out while I've got the site plan. You'll see in the updates that the Highway Authority have made some comments, and many of those we feel are able to be resolved through relatively minor changes to the internal layout areas here, for example, where the footpaths just need to be extended. Two things to be aware of. The first is that this connection through to Tanner's Close will need to be amended. This is something that some residents have raised, and they're quite right. At the moment, this narrows down the footway, which makes it very difficult to manoeuvre out of a private drive. That needs to be resolved, but I do have some indicative plans showing that that would be the case, and I've discussed that with the Highway Authority, who are reasonably comfortable. And also, they need to provide, at the request of the Highway Authority, another footpath on the other side of this road. So we are expecting there to be some amended plans resolving those issues. If we have a look at the street views, the applicant has provided these to give you an illustration of what the development may look like. This is the elevation onto Banbury Lane. This is the view that you would have along the Miller's Way, the curved road. And this is the countryside edge. So these are the properties that I was talking about that face outwards. And these are the properties that would front onto the attenuation pond and that informal open space. You can see there's a bungalow there as well. Just in terms of materials, the orange on this plan are the stone. So you'll see that you've got stone on the Banbury Lane edge and the countryside edge, and some brick properties interspersed, which is not dissimilar to what you've got, particularly on that existing Barwoods development. And in terms of house types, these two have been amended since the original submission. So we've looked to secure narrow gable spans, steep pitched roofs, chimneys. The window style, proportions and detailing has been improved. And we've got some properties without porches, some properties with porches. So that gives you an indication of the house types that are proposed. In terms of the updates, we have received some comments from the outstanding consultees. You'll see from the report that we were still waiting 4 key responses, 2 from SNC, from Ecology and Trees, and 2 from the county in respect to drainage and highways. The Ecology and Trees comments have been received, and these are produced in the updates along with some additional and amended conditions. In respect of drainage, the County Council have requested some additional information, and the applicant is in the process of collating that. And the recommendation is to delegate approval subject to the satisfactory resolution of any issues or objections that may be outstanding. In respect of highways, again, this has been updated in the written updates. Many points that the Highway Authority have raised, we feel, can be addressed by relatively minor changes to the internal layout. But as I pointed out on the site plan, there are a couple of areas where some slightly more substantial changes are needed. The recommendation in the report is, again, one of delegated approval subject to the satisfactory resolution of any remaining issues. And as per the written updates, this is now to include the submission of amended plans. Just to point out, also in the update, there is just some confirmation on financial contributions and a further recommendation in the event that the Planning Committee were to refuse to grant planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. So we revert to the full screen as we do now. And before we go to our public speakers, of which we have two. We'll ask, any member want to ask a question of the officer? Quickly glance around. Yes, Councillor Elaine Wilshire.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick query. It's with regards to the properties on Miller's Lane. You've got the tandem properties. Can you assure me that you've got the width of the car drive right so that people can actually open the car door to, say, put a baby seat in on one side of the car without having to move all the cars off the tandem drive because they're too close to the houses? That's the only question I've got.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the applicants have provided the dimensions of the parking spaces in accordance with what's in the council's parking SPD.
All right, I think that answers that one.
Yes,
Any other? Oh, you want to come back? Yeah.
Yes, can I just quickly come back? Because I think you need just a little bit of extra width when you've got the building at the side of the actual car parking space. There have been problems in Brackley on one of the estates there where people cannot get into the back of the car to put car seats and things like that in and put children therein.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, yes, I mean, I'm happy to go back and double check the size of all the car parking spaces just to make sure. Obviously, the recommendation is to delegate approval subject to resolving the highways issues. So I can double check that that is absolutely the case.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Councillor Wiltshire. Anyone else want to ask a question at this precise moment? No, I don't think so. All right, let's now go to our first public speaker, who is an objector, Ben Tilston, a local resident. So I'll hand over to you, Leslie.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, representing a number of objectors. My name is Ben Tilston and I live immediately adjacent to the application site on Millers Way. I begin by drawing your attention to the great many objections received from neighbours of this application site, some 30 or so. It is impossible for me to do justice to the objections raised, and we trust that members of the committee have already informed themselves of their content. I will take this opportunity to draw attention to three factors which should compel the committee to refuse this application. Firstly, residents of the existing Millers Way developments have expressed their concern over parking arrangements provided within the development, and notably the inclusion of tandem parking on driveways to the proposed dwellings facing Millers Way, highlighting the risks from the inevitable on-street parking in proximity to the junction with Banbury Lane and the daily queuing traffic it already generates. Northamptonshire Highway's own specification and standards for highway layouts states that tandem parking scenarios will require a supplementary parking space at 1/4 space per plot in the form of on-street provision, and instructs readers to try and avoid tandem parking. This supports neighbour statements of concern that on-street parking is inevitable, and we regard its inclusion in the proposals as unacceptable and irresponsible in proximity to this junction. I also draw the committee's attention to the response from NHS Northamptonshire Clinical Commissioning Group, which states that there will not be sufficient capacity in the local primary healthcare system to absorb the anticipated increase in demand created. In addition, the response from Northamptonshire County Council Key Services states that there is a lack of capacity in the Middleton Cheney area that would serve the development in early years education, and that primary and secondary education settings already exceed the Department for Education's capacity thresholds. The community infrastructure is so clearly oversubscribed beyond the available supply already. While Section 106 contributions are requested, these do nothing to address the already at capacity situation and are generally insufficient to ensure long-term services sustainability. There is no existing primary healthcare facility within Middleton Cheney, and a £29,000 Section 106 contribution is not going to secure one. Finally, I draw the committee's attention to the flawed inclusion of this application site within the definition of the village. The application site is only included by virtue of it being part of a larger land parcel, which has already been developed on 2 previous occasions. The Planning Committee previously accepted application S 2010-0473 MAO, the first application on this land parcel, on the recommendation of Case Officer Peter Bateman. Mr. Bateman referenced and made recommendations regarding the development creating a strong defensible boundary to protect the important local gap between Middleton Cheney and Banbury and to address the concerns of the parish council and villagers at the time. The same are disappointed to see that the application is now recommended for approval by this case officer, despite it removing the strong defensible boundary that was once grounds for accepting the development of this land. On this basis, we urge committee members to reject the recommendations of the case officer and defend the boundaries of this rural settlement and this valuable greenfield site by restating their past requirements for a strong defensible boundary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Ben Tilston, a local resident in Middleton Cheney. We have a second speaker, and that is Ned Fox of Barwood Homes.
Good afternoon. Please accept this statement in support of our application for 32 new homes on land south of Millers Way, Middleton Cheney. This development, within the confines of the village settlement boundary, is in accordance with the development plan as confirmed by the officer's report. Based on this acceptance of the principle of residential development in policy terms, we have worked closely with the case officer to ensure that these proposals will meet the exacting standards of the design guidance. We feel that this has really paid off and has helped to create a scheme which is very much of its place. The design principles of creating an outward-facing development with enhanced boundary planting that responds well to both the existing rural edge and the adjacent Suds Pond has led to an attractive and appropriate response to the context. This approach has carried through into the detailing of the new homes, which include traditional chimneys, roof pitches, fenestration and gable depths compliant with the SNDC guidance. The boundary treatments will further enhance the quality of this scheme through the use of estate railings, stone walls and native hedging. The street scenes provided should demonstrate the benefit that the design guidance has brought to the feel of the development. We have given due consideration to the issues raised by residents in respect of highways and parking. We have looked in detail at the proposed link with Tanner's Close and are confident that we will be able to deliver a solution that maintains the existing pedestrian access routes at their full width without encroaching on land outside the application site. The parking provision for this development fully complies with the South Northants parking guidance. Where possible, double-width driveways and parking courts have been provided. Elsewhere, the driveways reflect the existing tandem arrangements characteristic of many of the properties along Millers Way. We feel that this will be both appropriate in the street scene and will not create or exacerbate highway safety issues. There have been no objections on any technical matters to date. Indeed, the Strategic Housing Officer supports the proposals because we are assisting in meeting local housing need through the quantum, mix and tenure of affordable homes. We are currently working to resolve the comments of the lead local flood authority, who have requested further calculations in addition to what was included in the flood risk assessment and evidence of our drainage rights. This matter is in hand. We have no further concerns that the lead local flood authority officers will not accept our proposals subject to providing this further detail. Discussions with the highways officers are ongoing, and at this stage we are certain that we will be able to deliver an adoptable highways design. Therefore, we respectfully ask members to allow us to continue these positive discussions with the benefit of your support. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity to comment. I'm Ned Fox of Barwood Homes. Thank you.
Indeed, he did the sign off there. I don't need so to do. So you've heard our two public speakers. We can now go into a more general discussion on this particular application. And who would like to start us off on this? Not a great deal of... yes, Councillor Johns. So I'll go to you, then Councillor Breeze. Councillor Johns.
I mean, it is within the village confines. It does seem an attractive development. My only slight concern, well, I have two concerns. One, against sustainability in terms of public services. But I wondered if we could have the site plan put up again to talk through the issue that some of those complaining raised in terms of tandem parking.
Yeah, there we go. So can you talk us through the concern on tandem parking, Claire Caldwell?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. The residents are concerned that obviously there is a reliance on tandem parking for a large number of the plots, and their concern, as I understand it, is twofold. One, it's that vehicles will need to reverse out onto Miller's Way, and secondly, that because tandem parking they feel isn't particularly I suppose, easy to use for residents, so that people will have to reverse out for another person in their household to get out, that will lead to people parking on the street rather than using the tandem car parking spaces. The only thing I would say is that this is a situation that is apparent on Miller's Way at the moment. These properties, the Bovis development, there are a lot of tandem parking spaces on that development as well.
Councillor Johns?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is my concern, that, you know, we saw the photographs of higgledy-piggledy parking on Miller's Way, and people being people, I suspect the same would occur in this location. It's a question of whether that is acceptable. I mean, tandem parking, I mean, looking at number 13, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of tandem parking, and it doesn't seem to be a very
Claire, can you point out number 13? I can't quite see it so that people can know what he's talking about there.
Number 13 is this one here.
That one there, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor.
No, I mean, really, that's the essence.
That's the point you're making, yeah.
I think unlike a previous application we heard Middleton Cheney some while ago, this is within the village confines. I think it is an attractive development that complies with all our policies, apart from this issue of tandem parking that does, you know, in 2020 just doesn't seem sensible.
All right, well, we'll pause on that. Councillor Breeze, you're next to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this has always looked like a site that was going to be developed, and it is within the confines, and it will fit in, I think, well with the what's gone on next door. And it's unlike the other applications, it's a curious site in that it's sort of part of the village, but not part of the village because it goes straight onto the main road heading into Banbury. Barwood Homes, I see, developed the site above, and have done a lot locally. And in this application, they're offering 50% market and 50% affordable. How confident are we that this is a viable scheme as put forward today? And I know there are no predictions about how the applicant might choose to come back, but our office is confident that the scheme as presented to us today, seeking detailed permission, is viable.
All right, that's a question, Claire.
Yeah, sorry, I'll stop sharing my screen a moment. Well, certainly that's the indication that I've had from the applicants. As I understand it, there's been a long-term relationship with the landowner in respect of taking this site forward. I've had no indications that it is anything other than viable, and we've set out the heads of terms to the 106, which my understanding is they are agreeable to. And it has been, it is the result of discussions with our strategic housing team in terms of what would work affordable housing wise. So the applicants are aware of our requirements and have acceded to all those requests. So I'm not aware of any issues.
Okay, the site that's done adjacent, is that built out as the original planning permission was granted? Was there any issue over viability? Was there any affordable social housing on that site?
I don't believe so. It's a site just for 10 homes, the Barwood Homes site. The Bovis Homes site is the larger site at 79, so that would have had affordable housing. I don't know how much off the top of my head, but the Barwood site only 10. I'm not aware that that included any affordable housing.
It's a shame that we can't question the speaker on, because this is one I would have loved to have probed deeper on if we'd had the speaker to.
I tell you what, before I go to Councillor Sturgis and Brooke, Paul Brunage, the housing officer, is going to say something might be helpful here. Paul, if you could unmute your microphone there, otherwise we won't hear you. Yeah, go
Sorry
on.
about that. Yeah, yes, I can update you on the adjacent sites because I was involved in those myself directly. So there was on the Barwood site, which was for 10, I think, no, it was 9 of 9 executive homes, because that was below the affordable housing threshold, the trigger of 10 or more. Technically speaking, that was fine, but what we suggested was that because that came very soon after the Bovis development for 79 dwellings, that it was effectively a continuation of the same development, and therefore the arrangement that was made was that it was okay for Barwoods to go ahead and develop their executive homes, but the strategic housing team negotiated an off-site affordable housing commuted sum in lieu of the on-site development. So although we didn't get any actual on-site development, we got a pot of money to be spent on affordable housing elsewhere. In terms of the Bovis development, yes, there was an element of affordable housing that was reduced down to 28% on viability grounds after a viability assessment that housing undertook with Bovis, but that still resulted in a in a significant number of affordable homes being delivered. Claire is right in what she says in terms of this current application. The housing team have had very close contact with Barwoods over negotiating the quantum and the tenure and the mix of house types to make sure that it fits with what's needed locally in terms of the housing register. And at no point in those discussions have they indicated that they would need to reduce that down on viability grounds. On the basis that the viability work that I've done elsewhere on other developments, this is in development terms, this is a straightforward greenfield site. We wouldn't expect there to be any undue viability issues. Does that help to?
Well, it does. But as you've just said, the adjacent site was negotiated down on viability grounds, and this does look like a good mix as it is. And I would be very disappointed if
that negotiation was a long time ago. It was in a very depressed market, but yeah.
All right. Well, that's
I made my point, I think.
I think you've point. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Surgeson-Brooke, you want to...
Mr. Chairman, this application is within the village confines. Unfortunately, at the moment, we do allow tandem parking, but I think we ought to relook at tandem parking, because I would say most of us think this is an extremely bad idea. But at the moment, we think it's in our rules. So in the future, perhaps we could look at it again, but otherwise I see no reason why we could turn this down, even if we wanted to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bignell.
Yeah, and just in support of Councillor Johns, that number 13, if I got it right, there's 3 tandem spaces and a garage behind. Is that right? Is that white bit of garage? I know garages don't count as parking spaces, but I pity the bloke that got his car in that garage with 3 cars between him and the road. I mean, I think it's a great site and I think it needs to be developed, but it just seems that number 13, that white bit at the back, I guess, is a garage, is it?
Yes, that's right, Councillor. There are 2 properties which are 4-bed properties and therefore need 3 off-street parking spaces. So, for example, 12 is a 3-bed, so it only needs 2 spaces, so we wouldn't count the garage. 13 and 6 are 4-bed properties, and they're the 2 they do have triple tandem car parking spaces. Yes, that's right.
If you actually put your car in the garage, which I know a lot of people don't use it for storage, that would be 4 cars in a line. It's completely untenable, I would have thought, but that's
Well,
to decide.
yeah, I think it would be quite a challenge and rather boring if I had to do that every day.
You like
and can that be-
butterflies?
well, yes. Can I call? Well, can further discussions be had on this sort of element, as it were?
I think all I would say is that concern about the triple car parking spaces primarily just focuses on those 2 4-beds. I would say, and I think that from my point of view, I think for 2 houses out of 32 to have that, I think I would be struggling to say that caused such harm to highway safety that it warranted a refusal. Whether there was any option for the applicant to have a look at it and see if there is any way of accommodating it, then obviously I can go back and ask them, but it would need an amendment from the plan that's in front of you.
Do I sense, Councillor Bignell, you might be persuaded to look for some sort of further discussion on this?
Yes, I mean, I just think. Sorry, Councillor Johnson.
You go first.
Just seems not right on those 4-bedroom properties. I understand you need 3 spaces, but I'm not happy with that as a solution, and I would encourage further discussion of a solution. Sorry, Martin Johns.
Yeah, go to you, Councillor Johns.
Oh, I was going to say, is number 6 3 spaces as well?
Yeah, Claire did say 6 and 13 seem to be the ones.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do I sense you might like to sort of, between you, move that we, an amendment on this element of it? It's only 2 places we're talking about, but nevertheless, it's a concern. Councillor Johns?
Well, I an amendment, but I'm not sure without rejigging the whole site how you're going to achieve that. It seems to me there's probably 1 house too many. Or, I mean, I do approve of. I mean, our ideal is to keep vehicles to the side or to the rear of properties and not have them blocking the street scene. But all this is going to do is fill up Miller's Way with additional cars, because there is no way that the occupant of number 13 is going to have 4 cars in a line. It's just ridiculous.
I don't know, Paul Seckington, as a senior officer, what's your thoughts on this? We're just sort of a cul-de-sac on this in one sense.
I agree with Claire's conclusion that it really only is those large 4-beds with the 3 tandem spaces that's really causing an issue, because it is normal practice for a 3-bed house to have 2 tandem spaces. So I think we're only talking about the 2 out of the 32 houses that's really causing a concern, and I wouldn't want to refuse an application purely on those grounds when our parking SPD allows for.
But further discussion perhaps could take place in regard.
But yeah, the recommendation is to delegate to sort out a number of issues anyway, and we can look into that matter, see if there's a way we can accommodate the concerns and address those whilst we're having those other discussions. I think that's the best way forward here.
I would be happy with that, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, I rather sensed you would, and I think as long as the point has been made, and therefore if it can therefore be followed up as we suggest, that the committee would be grateful. Yeah, Councillor Townsend.
Well, just to add to that, in a way, is it not buyer beware? I mean, I wouldn't buy a house with such appalling planning things. I mean, I do totally agree, but it'd be difficult to without upsetting the whole thing now. I think further discussions with the developer is really to be had.
Good. Well, I think we all agree on that. Is there anybody else like to comment, or otherwise I could ask that we go to the actual proposal and the recommendation before us? Anybody else got anything they want to say at this point? I can't see anything, so I look for someone to propose the recommendation, which is the grant permission, subject to these further discussions as listed in the. Yes, Councillor Paul Wiltshire, you're proposing. Thank you very much. And the second is Councillor Pritchard. Yes, indeed. All right, over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll start off with Councillor Pritchard. This is to approve this application. So are you for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bignell?
For.
Councillor Breeze?
For.
Councillor Budden?
think he's left the
He's
meeting.
gone, has he? Right. Councillor Cooper?
4.
Councillor Johns?
4.
Councillor Samiotis?
4.
Councillor Surgeson Brook?
4.
Councillor Dunham?
4.
Councillor Townsend?
4.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire?
4.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire?
4.
That's unanimous again. Thank you, Chairman. That's been approved.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's press on. Claire Caldwell is going to entertain us again, this time in Toaster. Your time to talk again, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Just bear with me a second. I just need to get some
Yes,
additional material up for you.
this is to do with the Churchill Retirement Living applicant.
Absolutely.
Water Lane in Toaster.
Yes, yes. Bear with me a second and I'll just share my screen. Right, so hopefully you've got a site location plan in front of you there.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, so this is a site that councillors will probably be familiar with. It's a site that came before the committee back in January of this year, and it concerns the a site in the centre of Toaster next to Waitrose. So this is the Waitrose supermarket and car park. And there is on this piece of land adjacent to the site a care home which is under, if not nearing completion now. And this application was resolved to be approved by the committee, as I say, in January of this year for a retirement living complex. No, I'm in the wrong drawing. Do excuse me a second. I'm getting my tabs mixed up. Right, so this is the committee plan that you've got, which again just shows you the application site. The triangles being the area of archaeological interest and the pink being the conservation area. And that's the aerial plan, currently occupied by bungalow and vehicle sales. Has an extant consent for 43 retirement apartments, and this application proposes the increase to 44. This is the care home that's adjacent to the site, which, as I say, is nearing construction. So it's this application site here, right on the corner of that roundabout. That's the access into Waitrose. That's the vehicle sales at the moment. The site plan doesn't change. So that is the same as the site plan that was approved. The area that's changed in respect of the apartments is this area here on this site plan, which is at the back of the building facing onto the Waitrose access road. And as I say, it increases from 43 to 44 apartments, changing the mix so that we're losing one bed and losing one 2-bed and gaining 2 1-beds. So I'll just show you on the next slide. So this area here, so this is the Water Lane elevation, and this is the access road to Waitrose. And it's this area here, which on the approved plans is shown as a single 2-bed unit. And on the proposed plans is now 2 1-bed units. So if I just flick between the two, you can see it's just that area that is being changed. And what that means is that there are some elevational changes that go along with that. So it's this part of the building here. You can see at the moment there was a door to a plant room, and that will be changing like that. So you can see those, if I flick between those, you can just see those relatively minor elevational changes. What's more substantive with this application is the section, the issues concerning the section 106 and the affordable housing contributions in particular, which were agreed as part of the previous 106. As set out in your reports, you'll see that we have got to a position with the applicants now whereby the affordable housing contributions would be essentially the same as were secured previously, but rather than being paid all pre-occupation, they will now be staggered, so that 25% will be paid pre-occupation, 50% prior to 50% occupation, and the remaining 25% prior to 75% occupation. It's subject to a viability assessment. This is all detailed in the report that your officers are content with, and recommend approval on that basis. There are no updates to make you aware of, Chair, so that's all I need to say on that for now.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed. So 43 to 44 was approved already. Any questions of the officer that you may have? No. Yes, Councillor Semiotis.
I only have one question, which I don't know if everybody else remembers, that we had an ongoing conversation with the officer last time that presented this about the windows again not being able to be opened, and I was just wondering, did that ever get rectified at all? Because you know that we don't like this. We like to be able to open windows.
Yes, I think the resolution for that was that a condition was proposed to be attached, which detailed the glazing arrangements, but obviously we wouldn't, in accordance with your instruction, insist on them being closed. I think part of the concern last time, as I understand it, was around the recycling provision, because there was a glass recycling bank just outside the site, but that subsequently has been closed, so it's just textile recycling now. So I think that addresses many of the issues. There is still a condition recommended to secure glazing details, but I'm happy to take on board that we would not insist on them being fixed shut.
Could we not well, is there no clause we can put in there to say that we don't, we'd rather that they were to be able to be opened? It just concerns me that people could be living in apartments and wouldn't be able to even open the windows. So rather than it being, oh, you can or you can't, can we not just have it as you can't?
Well, I was just checking. Sorry, Councillor. I was just checking the condition while you were talking there. So the condition at the moment asks for a scheme for glazing of the external elevations, including full specification details, as well as a method of mechanical ventilations. I mean, so if effectively they'd have a choice of either or, it would be up to us when we discharge the condition. But there's no indication that they would need to be fixed shut.
Okay. You think so, right? Okay. Well, Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the previous application I wasn't enamoured with or in favour of, but as we've agreed that, and there's not a fundamental change to that application, I support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to say anything?
We do have a speaker on this.
You're quite right. We do. We do. Well, when nobody else wants to ask a question, so whilst they might ponder if they want to say something else, we'll hear from our speaker, who is Matthew Shellham, Planning Issues Limited. He's the agent. Let's hear from Matthew Shellham. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm calling in respect to agenda item 11, 25 Bungalow Water Lane Coaster, and my deputation on behalf of the applicant. Ladies and gentlemen, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on this application. The committee may recall granting permission for the applicant's previous scheme of 43 units on this site in January this year. Since then, the world has changed, and the COVID pandemic has produced pressures for all of us and our businesses. For housing, the retirement sector is completely different to the mainstream housing market, and has been disproportionately impacted by the lockdown and post-lockdown, as many of its prospective purchasers are vulnerable older people who are still shielding or looking to minimise public activities. This has resulted in sales activities and completions being severely reduced, requiring unfortunate changes to the sector's business model. This has required reviewing a number of consented schemes to see what could be done to ensure that they are still viable to be delivered. The consented toaster scheme is one such site, and the applicant, in negotiation with your officers, has looked to make some modest changes to the proposal to ensure that the scheme can be delivered. The proposals in front of you look to increase the number of units by 1 to 44, achieved through a change of mix of apartments and internal layout arrangements using a surplus to requirements plant room. There is no physical changes to the building previously approved in terms of built form or layout, and only some very modest design changes to windows and doors. Through the course of discussions with your officers on this application, the applicant will maintain the planning infrastructure and affordable housing contributions agreed on the previously consented scheme. The scheme's viability has been reconsidered as part of this application by officers, and to enable the applicant to have a deliverable scheme, some of the payment points for the affordable housing contribution have been altered, but the overall receipt to the council remains as previously agreed. The applicant agrees with the officer's conclusions in respect to the direction of planning contributions prioritising the delivery of affordable housing, but the option is set out for the committee at paragraph 9.36 for a different split of planning infrastructure contributions, including the later request from the CCG. The PRO scheme would provide significant benefits, ensuring the deliverability of a specialised form of accommodation for the district's older population, contributes to overall housing land supply, to release under-occupied family housing back to the market, enhance the townscape of this part of Towcester, and contribute to planning infrastructure improvements. To conclude, the committee found that the applicant's previous application for 43 apartments was a meritorious application that would provide significant social, economic and environmental benefits for Towcester. The applicant is disappointed to have had to make this application, but it's unfortunately necessary. However, the agreed planning infrastructure contributions are being maintained, and the impact of the additional proposed unit is negligible and will go to meeting one other older person's housing need. If consented, the applicants would look to start work on site in the new year. If not, then there may be an indefinite delay to delivering what would be a positive specialised housing development for Towcester. I hope you can support the proposed application. Thank you.
And that was Matthew Shellham from who was the agent. Right, thank you, Leslie. Having heard him, anybody else wish to comment on this matter this afternoon? No. In that case, I look for a proposer. We have the recommendation in front of us. Councillor Townsend, you're proposing, yes? I think that's what you meant by your mouth.
Sorry, yes, absolutely,
yes,
that's fine.
Yes, that's right. And who would like to second this one then, please? Who do I see? Councillor Elaine Wiltshire. Thank you. Right, good. Right, so there we are, Leslie. Over to you again.
Thank you. We'll start with this is to approve this application.
Grant permission for the conditions, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll start with Councillor Pritchard then. Are you for or against this application?
For.
Councillor Bignall?
For.
Councillor Breeze?
For.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Hollowell?
For.
Councillor Johns?
For.
Councillor Samiotis?
For.
Councillor Sergeson Brooke?
For.
Councillor Townsend?
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire?
For.
Councillor Paul Wiltshire?
For.
And Councillor Dunham?
For.
That's unanimous then, thank you, Chairman. That's been approved.
Excellent. Right. If everybody's okay, we'll press on to our next, which is Milton.
Chair, can we not have a tea break?
Well, I was sort of raring to. I was in sort of fighting going on form, but if it's the majority view of the committee to have a tea break
and a loo break,
I agree with our shop steward, Chairman.
All right, well, we will. Hang on a second. Now the time now on my watch says 4:18, 4:35. Is that okay? Start at 4:35 again.
4:30 would be all right.
4:30.
Oh, 4:30. Right. Gosh, all right. Quick.
I mean, anyone small. This was small time.
All right, 4:30. So those of you watching on YouTube, I turn over to you, Richard Woods. Where we just pause for a second.
Yeah, a message will be displayed on the screen, just advising that we're adjourned until 16:30.
Thank you very much indeed. So, we are still live on YouTube at the moment.
Please mute your microphones.
Yes, would you do so? All of you mute your microphones.
Meeting adjourned then.
Somebody's got their mic open. Is it you, Paul? Oh, I can't see it. I can't even get to it.
Give me your signal, Chairman. I will stop sharing this screen.
Yes, I'm ready to resume.
Crack on.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, welcome back to the rest of the committee, suitably replenished with tea or coffee and the odd biscuit, I notice. And some music as well in the background from somebody as well. But anyway, we have 3 more. If you could mute your microphones if you are not speaking, and 1 or 2 of you have still got your microphones. Elaine Wiltshire, Councillor Wiltshire, could you mute your microphone, please? Thank you very much. Right, well, we have 3 more applications to consider at our committee this afternoon, and we start off with land east of Lower Road, Milton Malsa, and the case officer is Samuel Dix. So over to you, Samuel.
Thank you again, Chair. This application is in outline with all matters other than access reserved for future determination. It's for the erection of up to 65 dwellings on land east of Lower Road in Milton Malsa. I'll just share my screen now to run through the details. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah, we can.
Great. Oh, sorry, bear with me. The application site is presently a large open field of roughly 5 hectares located to the northeast of Milton Malsa, between Lower Road to the west and the Northampton Loop of the West Coast Main Line to the east. It is outside the settlement confines of Milton Malsa, as you can see here by way of the dashed line underneath my cursor, which runs up from the south along the edge of dwellings on Stockwell Road before continuing along the opposite side of Lower Road, with the application site, needless to say, outlined in blue on this particular map. The wider village of Milton Malsa, members may be aware, is a relatively compact village with an historic core here, surrounded by more modern developments around its edges. And you can see here how the application site would comprise the development of a fairly substantial gap towards the northeast there. And for that reason, officers conclude that it is of an inappropriate scale within this context. The application was originally accompanied by this indicative layout plan, which showed a relatively long and thin development bordered by open space to the north and east. This has subsequently been revised to a less detailed plan that takes its cue from the existing building line to the east and provides a more rounded form of development, again with large amounts of open space to the east and a thinner strip now towards the western side. I'll just run through some photos quickly so you can see how that might look on the ground. Most of these are taken from Lower Road as we go out of the village. This particular one is on the junction with Green Street and the High Street, with the application site in the background there, that open field there. This is a bit closer on the junction with Stockwell Road to the immediate south of the site. Again, you can see the open nature of the site extending or sloping slightly upwards from Lower Road towards the east. This is on Lower Road itself, looking up towards the southern boundary of the site, sorry, with the existing dwellings along Stockwell Road and their rear gardens you can see on the right-hand side. This is the northern parcel of the site, so taken in the same position, looking slightly left towards the northern boundary comprised this hedgerow. This is the point of access, well, the existing access and the proposed access, roughly in this location here. This is the northern boundary of the site. You can see this hedgerow running up before it gives way to Farmstead to the north. And then there's a few photos here just as we move along Lower Road, just to give you an impression of how this site forms the edge of Milton Malsa. I think the following one is probably the most slightly more panoramic view to give members an idea of existing dwellings on Stockwell Road. And then you can see this quite well-defined hedge line here with the development sitting within that gap effectively. And then that's just one final one from slightly further up Lower Road into coming into the village, again showing much the same thing. The final two photos I'm showing here are of Toaster Road, quite away from the site. This is looking towards the Northampton direction, and this one in the opposite direction. And I'm just showing you these because although this road is subject to a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, it is the subject of some local aspirations for traffic calming or similar measures. And as such, the applicant has proposed some works to that effect that I will just show you briefly. So this is the junction where the final two photos were shown with, as you can see there, markings on the road sign, on the roads, and also signage to effectively calm traffic in that particular location. And then on Lower Road, we have a proposed pinch point system or one-way give-way system, again, slightly off-site, just past the new access that was proposed to be created here. There's one final matter that may assist members to visualise, which is the matter of agricultural land quality. This is covered in section 9.6 onwards in the report. This map here shows how the area of grade 2 land that would be lost to farming purposes by this development. However, as per the report, you can see that this is a relatively thin strip of land that probably couldn't be farmed in its own right. And as such, officers have concluded it's acceptable to, it would be acceptable to lose that particular area of land to development. The only matters included in written updates are a minor correction relating to the number of letters of support that were received, and also confirmation from colleagues in environmental health that they are satisfied that noise from the nearby railway has been satisfactorily resolved through the amended layout, through the amended plan, sorry, and the revised noise assessment. I bring that to your attention in particular because we've heard a couple of points already in this meeting on other items in respect of windows being open, and just to give you a surety on that, in this development, there would be an acceptable level of amenity from the railway, even in a windows open scenario. The development is nevertheless recommended for refusal for the reasons listed in the report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, has anybody got a question at this point they want to ask Mr. Dix? No, I don't think you have. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Hollowell, you have. Please go ahead.
Can I just ask, were the railway operators consulted on this?
I don't believe they were, Councillor, no.
You don't want to follow up on that at all? No?
Yeah, just a little surprise, that's all. But no, I don't wish to follow it up.
No, okay, all right. Thank you for that. Any other question? No. Well, we have two public speakers on this one. The first one is one I'm going to be reading. This comes from Parish Councillor Brian Sumpton on behalf of and agreed by Milton Mouser Parish Council. And this is what he has said. The Parish Council strongly objects to the proposed development for the following reasons. 1. This proposal is for the development of 65 houses outside of the village confines, local planning policy SS1, and is in open countryside. There are no exceptional circumstances that would allow this development to proceed in contravention of planning policy. Point 2, the proposed site is currently agricultural land that is important local gap, which is intended to ensure there is no coalescence between villages and or Northampton Town, policy EV8. This policy is to ensure villages retain their rural rather than urban status. Milton Mouser is classed as a B secondary village, restricted infill, policy H5. This proposal contravenes this policy in respect of the size of the development in relation to the character of the adjacent area and the size of the village, approximately 20% increase in the total number of homes. Milton Mouser has very limited facilities. There is no shop or post office, no doctor's surgery, no youth club, only an hourly bus service and very little employment opportunity. For almost all day-to-day needs, residents have to travel to and from the village using private cars. Milton Mouser is not considered to be a sustainable location for a development of this type. Fourthly, section 5 of the local plan policy H5 is intended to ensure that any development does not lead to incremental development. Previous planning applications by the same landowners for 25 houses on adjacent land have been refused and confirmed by inspector on appeal. Fifth point, the proposed development is adjacent to an area of sheltered housing on the outskirts of the village, and a development of this size would degrade the quality of life of those living in the existing bungalows. Six, there is virtually no support for this proposal amongst villagers, with approximately 80 objections being submitted. Villagers have given support to parish council proposals for a small development of affordable homes on a site on the opposite side of the village. And lastly, for these reasons, the parish council strongly objects to this outline planning permission and requests its refusal. So that was Brian Sumpton from Milton Malser Parish Council. If we now can turn to a recorded broadcast, this comes from Stephen Harris, who's the of Emery Planning. He is the agent, Stephen Harris.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Harris and I'm the agent for this outline application for up to 65 affordable and market dwellings, with access being the only detailed matter sought for approval. I set out the benefits of the application to explain why permission should be granted. I note that officers conclude there is a 5-year supply. However, planning should not be about a mathematical calculation, but providing homes for people in need. In Milton Malser, where there is an exceptional identified need, the planning system should be providing the much needed homes. This is because the Council's Strategic Housing Team states that the 2011 parish survey for Milton Malser said there was a need for 14 social rent units and 1 shared ownership unit. None have been provided. That need is increasing, and as of the 24th of April 2020, 34 households have indicated that they'd be willing to be housed in Milton Malser. The parish plan also records that people born in Milton Malser have needed to leave the village due to a lack of homes. The delivery of this site would provide 33 affordable homes, which is a significant benefit to help young adults and families into a home. Paragraph 68 of the NPPF supports medium-sized sites as they're built out relatively quickly. The applicant's excellent track record has been and continues to be delivering sites within 24 months of permission with developers or through their sister company, Hollands Homes. There will be a limited adverse impact on the rural character and wider landscape. This is an inevitable impact for any development on a greenfield site to provide a home where the need is. There are no other available or deliverable sites in Milton Malser that would meet this need in full. It is a development at a sustainable village, easily accessible to Northampton. The proposed exceptional highway benefits, including traffic calming measures and bus stop improvements on Lower Road and safety improvements at Toaster Road, which were put forward by the applicant following consideration of long-standing local community wishes, and which will result in a wider public benefit. There will also be a range of social and economic benefits, including the provision of new homes bonus, CIL, council tax revenue, construction jobs, an increase in spending and services and facilities in the village, and Section 106 payments for a significant area of open space to meet the needs of existing and proposed residents, as well as providing an attractive woodland edge, £65,000 for upgrading public transport in the village to help the longer-term viability of services in Milton Malser, £33,000 for healthcare, £15,000 for library facilities, and £258,000 for education. Therefore, I invite you to support the application and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was Stephen Harris, planning agent for this application. All right, now we go to our debate, but we start with the ward member who is actually on this committee. Councillor Karen Cooper, would you like to have your say?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First, we'd like to thank Mr. Dix for his comprehensive report, which has outlined the application. But I'm speaking now on behalf of my ward partner, Councillor Addison, and myself, and we are like-minded as to how we feel about this application. We both basically strongly object to this application. I cannot agree with anything that the agent has just told us. The proposed site is outside the village confines. It's in the agreed West Northants Joint Core Strategy, which states that the land is part of an important local gap. And this is to maintain the rural nature of a village and to act as a buffer against, in this case, Northampton and any expansion from Northampton. This is a tiny, compact village. You've all had the chance to see the area of land where the proposed site is. It's a massive chunk, and it's a massive development on such a tiny rural village. We have great concerns about the access to the site. One access in for a huge proposed development of some 65 dwellings. You've had the chance to see in the case officers report to us how the access is, the roads that the access would into the site would come in and out of. In this tiny rural village, even though it is on the edge of the village, the access is just not suitable. And coming out onto an incredibly busy Toaster Road, I understand the agent, they have proposals for traffic calming, etc. This is just not what the parish and the residents of Milton Mauser want. It's not a sustainable village, as we have heard. They have no shop, they don't have a post office, they have don't have a doctor's surgery, they have actually not even a youth club, they have no youth provision. Which is something as a council we are working on for them and working with them. They certainly don't have any youth provision and nothing that we can provide that 65 new dwellings would bring the additional youth to this tiny rural village. A development of this size would certainly erode the rural nature of Milton Mauser, and it's something that we just can't accept. It's our responsibility as a committee here to ensure that villages such as Milton Mauser are able to retain their rural status. So from that, everything that we've heard from the case officer and from the parish council and several residents of the village support this too. With this in mind, my ward partner and I concur with the case officer's recommendation for refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper. We'll move into further discussion in a moment, but it might be distracting you. Matthew Barrett, you look as though you haven't got a face, a big bright light on you at the moment. If people are watching, perhaps you could just adjust your lighting at the moment. Thank you very much. Yes, Sammy Dix, Mr. Dix. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, sorry to disrupt
the
order of event. I just wanted to clarify an answer I gave to Councillor Hollowell earlier. We didn't consult the train operators on this application, but we did consult Network Rail, and they did not provide any comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate that response. Okay, anyone else like to have their say on this particular application? Councillor Townsend. Councillor Townsend?
I always press the wrong button.
Yes, well, there we are.
No, I mean, to me, this is absolutely terrifying application. I noted there was no pre-consultation with the council, with our officers. I mean, presumably they will just go straight to appeal, and hopefully we will put the best people we've got to defend it. I would have thought we were very defensive, I mean, particularly Milton Mauser, which is always under threat from what happened to the north, and they've had to suffer a lot because all these transport, the big transport, rail transport application sites are very, very close as well. And this, I would have thought, was a particularly important place to just keep that, keep a check on them. So definitely we want to turn it down, and we want to defend it very, very strongly on appeal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I can only agree with the previous speakers. I can see no advantages to this application and only disadvantages. Whilst I agree we should study each application on its own merits, there does appear to be a tendency to look very carefully at applications that are outside the village confines, as this is. I can see no reason why we should make an exception and grant permission in this case. It brings no advantage to the villages. To the village, it sets a very difficult precedent, I would think, for any future application. And in that case, I am very much minded to oppose the application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bignell.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Wiltshire, everything said, but Milton Knowles only has 700 occupants currently, so the addition of 56 houses will bring, I don't know, some couple of hundred people. I mean, that's a 30% increase in the village. That's totally disproportionate regardless of where it is, and from fact and size it just doesn't make sense.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hollowell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, 2 or 3 points. I mean, first of all, like Councillor Townsend, I note that there was no pre-app on this, and they've still had quite a lot of free officer time trying to sort something out which might have been acceptable, but it's not really. To my mind, 7.13 on page 217 of the report, which is the environmental health objection arising from the railway, that's crucial. And I don't accept that the new revised layout makes it really any different. The railway, the noise from the trains will still be excessive. I'm kind of surprised at the soil quality. I'm not going to argue with it, but I'm just surprised that you've got mostly 3B, some 2, but no 3A at all, which of course is best and most versatile land. At the end of the day, this is outside the village confine. It's in open countryside. It's contrary to the development plan. Paragraph 12 in the NPPF says where a planning application conflicts with an up-to-date development plan, which ours is, permission should not usually be granted. And I can't think of any material considerations that would override that. So I support the refusal to grant consent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to have their say on this application before I look to someone to propose what we do next? I don't see anyone at this point. Glancing across the yes, I do now. Councillor Johns, you put your hand up.
I mean, I support all the comments that councillors have made. I just hope that this isn't a view into the future with planning.
Well, there. Who knows? We don't know what the future holds, do we? But we hope to be. We must be optimistic. Do I have anybody who'd like to propose? Yeah, Councillor Hollowell. Yes, you're going to propose, are you?
Yes, I am. Chairman, if I may, I will propose that the officer's recommendation to refuse permission is adopted.
I'm grateful. And the seconder, please, for this is going to be Councillor Pritchard. Right. Okay. Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll start with Councillor Pritchard. Are you for or against a refusal of this application?
I'm actually for refusing this application.
Councillor Bignell?
For.
Councillor Breeze?
For refusal.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Hollowell?
For the refusal.
Councillor Johns?
For.
Councillor Samiotis?
For.
Councillor Sergeson Brook?
For refusal.
Councillor Townsend?
For refusal.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire? Have we got Councillor Elaine Wiltshire?
She can hear you. I don't think you can hear her at the moment.
Can you put your thumbs up if you're for?
Oh, so they can obviously see you.
You're muted, Councillor Wiltshire.
Yeah, you can now.
She's for. Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For refusal.
And Councillor Danham.
Yes, I'm for refusal.
So that's unanimous, Chairman. That's refused.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We press on then to just down the road to Blissworth next. And this is Land off Northampton Road. Peter Gittins is the case officer. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an outline application for 30 homes with all matters reserved except the access. I'll just share my screen so I can see where we are. Okay, this is the location of the application site in blue, off the Northampton Road. The dotted line is the current confines. for Blisworth. So it's outside the confines in the open countryside. The pink shaded area is the conservation area. It contains some listed buildings in there as well. So it's to the north of the main town of Blisworth. There is a development site with planning permission just to the west of Chapel Lane, some 27 houses with permission. That's in an early stages of development. And the land slopes down towards the canal over to the west from Northampton Road, and the access is proposed off the Northampton Road around. So I'll just move to the indicative layout. Sorry, this is the aerial photograph. Get to the layout plan. You see the access off Northampton Road. It is indicative, it's an outline, so the scheme could change in form. There's only the access that's approval is sought for. I say it lies outside the settlement confines in the open countryside. It doesn't meet any of the exceptions criteria within policy LH1 of the local plan part 2. That's residential developments in or outside settlement confines. And we have an adequate housing land supply, and the plan is up to date and not silent. I'll just run you through some photographs while I'm here. This is photographed from within the site. You see the land sloping down towards the other side of the Herries fencing. There is the Chapel Lane site. See the slope quite pronounced on that site. Again, the Herries fencing and the entrance to the Chapel Lane site, and this site sloping away. Look, it's looking back towards Blisworth. And then I wanted to show you views from the higher ground to the west. So we're looking now from the west back towards the site. This is the part of the applicant's landscape visual appraisal. And you can see the application site there. And in there. So you can see Blisworth here. So it'll appear as an extension of Blisworth. The Chapel Lane site a little lower on the horizon. This set up and angled up to you when viewed from Chapel Lane. It's not considered that the material planning considerations that weigh in favour of the application. Additional housing, provision of affordable housing and economic benefit override the conflict with the development plan in this case. A similar application was refused in 2014 for outline development on this site. I have no updates to report, and the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons within the report.
Thank you very much. That's good. Right, anybody got a question they'd like to put to Councillor Townsend?
Did we not, if my memory play me, did we not, this is not come for us last time or the time before?
Yes, we had a similar application just to the north. I'll just share my screen again and I'll show you where that was, Councillor. Yes, that's the layout plan. The location plan. Yes, the similar, very similar scheme for 35 houses was off Station Road, just to the north here. Can you see where my cursor is?
I can, yes. Yes.
So
Oh, good.
The access was this way in, and then that's that end. So, yes, that was on the last committee, and this site is to the south of that previously refused application.
I thought I was going mad.
No, well, I think we can assure you you're not.
Yes, they're trying. They're all jumping on the bandwagon. Yes, right.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Anyone else want to ask a question or not of the officer? No, I don't see that. Well, we've got one public speaker for this, so we're going to hear from Viv Hartley, who's clerk to Blisworth Parish Council.
Oops. Sorry, it won't be a moment.
Blisworth Parish Council object to application S 2020/0223/MAO at land off Northampton Road, Blisworth, for the reasons below. Planning policy dictates that development outside of village confines should only be considered when there are exceptional reasons for doing so and when there are no adverse factors identified. This is clearly not the case with this application. The elevated position of the proposed site would result in a significant adverse visual impact on the village and the adjacent conservation area. It would be detrimental to the appearance and character of the area, contrary to planning policy. The impact is particularly evident from the Gayton side of Blisworth, where the proposed site forms a major part of the skyline. The applicant has attempted to counter these points by referring to the nearby Chapel Lane development, but the Chapel Lane development is at a lower level than the proposed site and as a result has a significantly reduced adverse impact. The proposed access to the site is also problematic due to its location at the top of a hill close to a bend, particularly dangerous when the traffic is turning right out of the site, even if a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit were adhered to on this busy road. This development would cause even more surface water, causing flooding further down the field, where the proposed houses are scheduled to be built. Concerns were raised when the Chapel Lane application was presented and special tanking facilities had to be part of the conditions. There is also already a site in the early stages of development for 27 new houses in Blisworth, and the Parish Council do not think that there is a need for further development in the foreseeable future. Further development would put an additional strain on an already overstretched infrastructure. An application on land adjacent to this site was recently declined, and Blisworth Parish Council is confident that this speculative application will also be rejected.
Thank you. That was Viv Hartley, clerk to Blisworth Parish Council, and she's the only public speaker on that one. Okay, well now, how do you want to do? Anybody got an opinion on this? Want to say something that we haven't already heard? Councillor Paul Wiltshire first.
Thank you, Chairman. I just feel that I should be able to cut and paste my comments from the last application to this one for exactly the same reasons. There's no tangible benefit to the village, speculative outside the village confines. It brings no advantages and many disadvantages. And I'll be quite willing to propose that we refuse the application.
All right, I'll bear that in mind. But Councillor Townsend, you're going to say something first.
I'm just going to make a comment. Is the Chapel Lane, so I remember that was quite a difficult one. And I remember saying at the time, gosh, that's going to make this site, are we not creating a precedent? And of course, I was told one application at a time, but actually, and it would be quite unsuitable because it's, as has been said, it's on top of a hill, whereas the Chapel Lane one is down in a valley, and was I think it was a part of a farm. It had been a farm there and all the rest of it. There was some buildings, but it just shows how you can create a precedent because you have got a development on one side and the road on the other. So, as you could say, it was infilling in some way, but I really don't think this one would be suitable simply because of its effect on the landscape. You would see it from miles away. And so therefore I would absolutely go along with the officers.
Thank you. Anyone else got an opinion they'd like to express to us this afternoon? No, you're not all shouting at once. Yes, I do see Councillor Hollowell. I thought you had something to say. Go ahead. Yeah,
thank you very much, Chairman. I agree entirely with the report. The only thing I think I might like to bear in mind is, in a sense, to head off any inquiry, any appeal, and to make the point at this stage that this development, even if it were allowed to go ahead, would not meet the needs of Northampton. we know that it's not in the NRDA, but the question is being asked now at inquiries, does this meet the requirement for policy S4 or not in the joint core strategy? And I say that it doesn't, and I think we should bear that one in mind. And I think the applicant, if they were to make an appeal on those grounds, I don't think it would be successful. This doesn't meet the objectives and the policies of the core strategy, so I think it should be rejected. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, we have got Councillor Paul Wiltshire has proposed that he's willing to propose, so I'm sure he still is, that we reject this application as recommended by the officer. That is so, is it, Councillor Wiltshire?
That is indeed so, Chairman.
Thank you. So who would like to second that proposal? Councillor Townsend. Grateful. Thank you. Right, Leslie, over to you again. Hello, Leslie.
Leslie, you're muted.
Yes, you're on. There you are.
Yes.
I want to hear you loud and clear.
Sorry. We'll start with Councillor Pritchard.
I support the officer's recommendation to refuse this application.
Thank you. Councillor Bignall.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dannin.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
Who's left?
She was less the meeting. Yeah.
Has she? Councillor Townsend.
For refusal.
Councillor Wiltshire. Sorry, Elaine Wiltshire.
Or refusal.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For refusal.
So that's unanimous for refusal of the application.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. We move on to our final item this afternoon, which takes us to 9 Church Lane, Cold Hyam. Somewhere we haven't been before, I don't think. Let's go to our case officer, Emma Sanders, for this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if my video is loading.
Well, we'll see in a moment. We can hear you anyway.
Okay. I think that's working.
Yeah. Oh, that's me. There you are. That's
There we go.
Yeah, go on.
So the application site is a residential property which is positioned within the village confines of Cold Hyam. The application has been referred to committee as it's been submitted on behalf of an officer within development management. The application seeks to address whether or not the development is considered to be permitted development. The proposed development consists of a dormer extension to the rear of the property, which would be positioned in the roof slope shown in the photograph, and in line with the proposed elevations. The proposed development is considered to comply with all the criteria set out under Class B of the General Permitted Development Order, which is contained within the report, and therefore is recommended that the certificate of lawfulness is granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, if you could switch your screen to what it was, that's better. Right, now, anybody either got a question, or if not, I'm tempted to say we might move to the recommendation, but I don't want to anticipate things. Anybody got a question they want to put on this? No? All right.
Move to the recommendation, Chairman.
Well, yes, right, excellent. Right, we'll move there. So you're proposing.
We support the recommendation.
Thank you. And who would like to second it? Why don't you put your hand up? Yes, Councillor Paul Wiltshire. Right, excellent. Right, Leslie, over to you again. Final time.
Oh, thank you. Okay, then we'll start with Councillor Pritchard.
He's actually just left the meeting.
Oh, has he? Oh dear. Councillor, we'll go yourself then, Chairman. Councillor Dannin.
Yes, I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Councillor Bignall.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Hollowell,
4,
Councillor Johns,
4,
Councillor Samiotis,
4,
Councillor Surgeson, or I think Councillor Surgeson Brooke
gone.
has
She's not
left,
yet.
hasn't she?
Oh.
Councillor Townsend,
4,
Councillor Wiltshire, Elaine Wiltshire,
4,
and Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
4,
Right.
That's unanimous.
know
To
the
say
result.
we have lost a few members, Chairman, but we are still quorate. So
Yes,
that,
I understand. Yes, that's in case anybody wondered, but we are quorate. And
yeah,
was-
so that's agreed to grant the certificate of lawfulness.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you all very much indeed. That brings an end to this afternoon's planning committee, which we seem to have got through quite efficiently without going on for too long. And those of you who've been watching, hope you've enjoyed it. Now we resume again on Thursday, December the 3rd. This in effect is our November meeting. We've had 2 in October, so we're back again on December the 3rd. So thank you very much indeed. The broadcast will now end, but if you wait until the actual signal